Do we have any, Shelley, Jeannie, do we have any requests for adjustments?
No, sir.
Kim?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody want to remove anything from the consent agenda?
I have some modifications for consent agenda number 4 and a question for Jeannie on number 6.
Take those two out. Can we have a motion for the rest of them?
So moved. Up to present.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Item 4, review and act on the minutes of the April board meeting.
Okay, I think in my first comment is on page 6. And on the top of, that was the special meeting we had.
Oh, okay.
There's agenda we have to approve, and it said the meeting began at 3 p.m., which I think is just a copy of what we usually do. I think it started later at 6.
30.
Okay, there you go. At the bottom. Oh, okay, just at the top, that's what it says. And then I don't know if we all 5 of us were there or not. I don't know if that's a copy or if that's true too. My comment there. And that's all I have for item 4.
Okay,
Should I do 6 or should we?
sure.
Okay, item 6 is Jeannie. Your page 21. I'm assuming that the, let's see, here we go. The preliminary totals, because that doesn't have people that contested it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So, what we have today, the preliminaries are out. They are doing protests right now. Certified to come out in July and will be closer to a current value for y'all.
And could you tell me what RCG 336 is?
That's roll correction. That was the last one we got before we roll correction group is what they call it.
Do they change numbers every year or is,
Every month. It's a
Oh.
correction roll every month.
and so 337's coming next?
Actually, 340 I have.
Okay, I just saw it. I had no idea.
Yeah,
Thank you
was
for that
what we compared
clarification.
it to, because that was the most current 24.
Thank you. Okay. That was it, boss.
Okay. We have a motion on item 4.
So move to accept the changes.
Item 4, all those in favor?
Aye.
Item 6, motion,
Move to accept the changes.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Item 8, receive the regular monthly SARA Woodlands Division report, including updates on operations projects and public outreach.
Good afternoon. Reports in your packet beginning on page 22, starts with GRP, or starts with Woodlands, moves into GRP, but pretty normal month, no violations, nothing out of the ordinary, but if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions?
For item 8, I have questions, yes. The AC pipe study up, everything on track for the next all mud meeting?
June 10th, I believe, is the next all mud meeting.
Will be the topic in June 10th.
You got it. And you'll have the information, or Eric will have the information Thursday, Friday before to get it to y'all, enough time to review prior to.
That was on my list. How did you
The
do
last
that?
time, and the time before.
Thank you for that, Chris. I have one other question. Where are we with Corolla? Are they still active? Are they pending the SF?
They're pending SFUE. They're currently on hold
They are.
until that conversation happens.
That's kind of what it suggested at that Rusty meeting, but I wasn't sure that's what happened.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Eric will go through that a little bit later.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So Chris, on page 23, I've gone through this mental gymnastic before, but tell me if I'm wrong here. I'm on the monthly accounted for water loss. You've got accounted for losses of approximately 4.4 million. No, 6.3 million. Those 3 items, okay? And it says that the unaccounted for loss is 7 times greater than the accounted for loss, 3.5 versus 0.5. So that means we have 44 million gallons of unaccounted for loss.
Mhm.
Have any clue where that might be going?
If we did, we'd stop it. I mean,
Yeah.
because some of it is like the meters in the system, right? That every resident has. They're supposed to read 100%. They could read 99. They could read 101. Chances are, being as new as they are, they're likely going to be close to 100%, but not every single one of them. There's variations. Some of it is on our flow meters as well, on our wells. They're supposed to be 100%. Sometimes they're 97, 98, 99. We check and we calibrate them, but they're off a little bit. Some of it is going to be fires that we're not aware of, right? If you have somebody, small fire that we're not aware of and we can't go and say, okay, the fire department was here and they used 10,000 gallons of water. Could be water theft. Could be a lot of different things. But some of the accounted for is, well, not on this, this is a different report. We do have estimates we can use for fire flow, theft, residential leaks and stuff like that, but we just don't use them in this report. This is just raw data.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Ed,
Quick comment on page 41 is the Bear Branch watershed maintenance report for your information. Nothing stands out on that.
Any other questions?
And so last month you gave us that report about the condition of the dam and you said you were following up. Can you give us a little update on that?
Engineer, it's, wouldn't say he's on hold, but we requested an opportunity to make a presentation to each of the 5 MUDs. And Eric will be working with y'all to coordinate that meeting.
Kind of surprising.
Any others?
There was an article in the Impact magazine that I received today. And I poured out a copy for Shelley, but it basically said that it was going back to Crenshaw's office for funding.
If you recall, last month, we were asking for your all support for a letter of support for additional funding. And so that's in the works. We won't know until probably this time next year whether it was approved. We have been told that that's the only project that they're putting in on behalf of SRA/Woodlands Water. And the one thing I did find out, because this was a little bit of a question when I reported to y'all last month, the 5 million that we're requesting is the federal share. So that would be the 75%. That's equal to the 75%. And then anything above that cost would be local share.
follow up on the lawsuits.
Did you say that's the only project that's being requested, or it's the only one that
It's the only one that SRA and WWA are requesting.
okay, but there are others that will be competing.
Yes.
It's a question on the losses. When there are accidents that, whether a contractor breaks a pipe or the instance in Capstone where the lady ran over the hydrant. The losses that are happening in those occasions, how accurate can you guesstimate?
Well, that's another part of it. So it's probably 75, 80%. You take if a contractor bores through it, you say, okay, it's a 2-inch hole and the pressure was this much and, whatnot. You can determine roughly how much water came out of the hole, but it's still an estimate at that point in time. So.
Yeah, so that has to be part of the.
Be unaccounted for yet, but we can get as best as we can across the board with various items.
Thank you.
The others? Item 9, update on Bear Branch, Panther Branch, research forest drainage improvements.
Yes, it's kind of twofold. One, that is to update and get a meeting set forth for the stakeholders. We have a meeting set for next week. We did a little survey for invites. However, just earlier today, I was informed by the engineers that if something's come up, they can't make it. So we're going to go back to the drawing board on some dates. So we're going to be sending out a notice to all the stakeholders to start over on trying to get a date, but we'll get it. We're getting there. There's 2 individuals that could make it from their office, but the 2 that really know the most about this couldn't. And so I didn't want to risk, and I just wanted the main guys there. So that's really what it came down to.
Good call.
So I'm deciding to scratch it.
Okay.
So I've given them, we're going to be sending out some new dates as options.
Thank you.
On that doodle. The other part of that was with what Ed was talking about a little bit with the dam. And we're going to look to try to get something scheduled for July. That'll be a decent month between kind of going through budgets and stuff. to get a meeting set up to talk about, to have the engineers that made the recommendations on the dam to come in and make a presentation so we can learn a little bit more about what Ed had presented last month. So we're looking to do that in July. And what we'll likely do, instead of having them come in for 5 meetings, we'll probably have the 5 stakeholder muds do a 5 mud meeting, if you will, something like that. And so that we can just do it one time.
Yeah, it seems more efficient. Yeah.
We'll try to accomplish that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's all I had on 9.
Eric, if I may, one of the things that we're going to need out of this meeting with the 5 muds is, obviously your questions, why the additional thickness, but any other questions that may come up during this meeting, we will pitch those to the engineer so that they can be part of the next forward step scope.
To Eric?
Yes, sir.
Item 10, Brian?
So legislative session, reported on that at the trustee meeting. If you are interested in particular bills, encourage you to watch the tape on that. Session does end in about a week and a half on Monday, June the 2nd. We'll see if the governor decides to call a special session after that. Of course, is at his discretion. And if he does call a special session, the items that are considered are also limited to his discretion. So we'll see how that shakes out. As usual, once the session ends, we will have our comprehensive legislative summary for all of our district clients on bills that are of interest, and that should come out probably at your July board meeting.
Are you tracking House Bill 638?
Yep.
It's in Betancourt's committee. Do you know any more than that?
Yeah, we've reported on that at the trustee meeting before. That's the one that deals with the
Video and audio
Yeah.
recording
Yeah,
for all months.
We've reported on that for a few months now. And so I think by and large, for all except for maybe Metro, it's not going to have a difference on what you do voluntarily. It would just obligate other districts to do the same.
Ed? Thank you. Item 11, interim computation report.
Yep, so that's in your packet. We've talked before about the arbitrage rules of the IRS and how you can't earn a materially higher rate than the rate on your bonds. That excess is arbitrage. That is, by definition, a return without risk. And therefore, those funds have to be paid to the IRS, and the reports are due on 5-year intervals. And so your report will be due and payment will be due in 2027. But we talked about the fact that a lot of districts are now having interim reports prepared so that they have some visibility into what their potential responsibility would be. We did recommend that this district get one because we have the 0 interest bonds through the Texas Water Development Board. So basically any interest would be owed to the IRS. So that report shows that right now it's 57,000 and change, but that number will of course grow between now and the time of the funds being due. My suggestion would be, let's probably get another one at the end of year 4, so we have a little bit of runway. The time frame is very short for when you have to make the payment to the IRS. Once the final report is prepared, it's like 60 days. So you don't have a lot of time up front. That's the districts where they owe chunks to the IRS that they didn't anticipate. And then we're having to figure out, okay, do we have to pull funds from our general fund because we don't have them anymore? We spend them from the construction fund. Want to make sure we avoid that as much as we can and have some visibility into what will be owed to the IRS.
So this is a 2-year report?
5. Did you say 5?
Well,
Well, this
period covered is a 22 to 24.
correct. That's
And
why I
then
would say interim report.
And then we got it almost a year after that period closed.
Well, I think that was the period that they reviewed it through. I don't know that was when they started. Yeah.
Well, what about my point was that you say, after 4 years, let's get a report. If it takes a year to get, it's kind of late.
Well, I think they did it through a 2-year period. I don't know. Maureen interacts with the rep, but I mean, we can go down on the timing between the end of their review period and when they
I
provide
think
it.
your suggestion is a great one. I just don't want to wait and then go, like you said, oh dear, where do we get the money? So thank you.
This goes back so this goes back to a comment that I made several months ago about getting this liability put on the books and roll it forward, each year. I spent considerable time going through this and trying to understand it. I understand the period from June of 22 to June of 24. We didn't begin earning interest on the zero interest bonds, the 6.550 million, until August of 24. So I understand zero for that. What I still have a question about is what about the grant for 1,130,000?
We don't have those funds. They don't provide those till later.
It's showing up on the financials.
It is, so I think Doug at ACS is gonna kind of dig into that a little bit. But yeah, they're at Bank of New York, that and the bond funds, so I guess they don't have to play.
We really need to face that down.
Yeah, because we're only responsible for, well, have them write it down, but the concept is bond proceeds, what you issued bonds for that you have to in theory pay interest on, that you used your tax exempt status to obtain. So a grant, let's say you got a grant and there were no bonds involved, you wouldn't know anything about it. It's a grant from the state that wouldn't be subject to these rules. The theory behind the rules is that you don't want creative entities that go out and issue bonds at a rate that they're able to use their tax exempt status for, and then turn around intentionally and go invest that and get to keep the delta. Which, my understanding, that was done in the 80s creatively, and these rules were a response to that.
Every law is usually because of things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so the one chart back here that says zero relates to the zero because the interest didn't begin accruing until August 24. The second ledger has to do with the funds that were transmitted from the other MUDs to MUD 67. Those are not bond funds. That was cash. And that cash has been put into our Texas class, the various free investment funds. So the question is, why are they coming up with 57,000 due on that when there are no bonds involved? So that's a major issue.
They shouldn't. They shouldn't. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
yeah, they shouldn't. And those are contributions from participant districts. Those are not bond proceeds.
Now, the only thing I can say is, well, maybe they went back to the original document and the original document said that there was going to be bond funds from these other MUDs. But I don't know.
That's a good question. That's a good question. That needs to get run down with ACS.
All right, so I think before we can begin making accruals and recording liabilities and making notations on the cash chart every month, saying that money needs to be permanently deducted once we establish what it should be. But you can't make reasonable projections without this baseline being just.
I mean, refer to the experts on that. To me, simplistically, I mean, it's a lot easier for this bond issue because it's a 0% rate. So we're not trying to figure out a delta between like 3% interest rate in the bonds versus 5% return. To me, it's if you got a debt service fund or an escrow account that has, making up a number, $5 million in it, anything over that 5 million has to be paid to the IRS because you can't, any interest is over the interest that you pay because you're paying zero. So it should be pretty easy to be able to, set aside and identify them.
That's good question.
Okay, so did they give you a timeline on responses?
Should be soon. We just wanted to take a look. This situation is unique. Or unusual.
Okay, thank you.
Item 12, General Manager, Eric.
All right. First item, we continue to do assessment of the ditches across the woodlands, and happy to report we have some pictures to show you of some actual work that we've started. As you recall, you set aside in the budget this year some additional funds to do some known ditch cleanup. And so the MUD, the one that says 3J-1 ditch, that is the one that's there across from the high school, essentially. What was done when we went in the top, let's see, bottom left corner, I guess, picture is probably the best. There's That's a 42-inch pipe that was found to be disintegrating. And so this work replaced that pipe, and it goes back to the fence, and there's a manhole. So what you see there with the riprap around the slope paving, all that's new, plus a pipe that goes back to about where the fence is. Then we also came in and cleared, and didn't necessarily take down trees, but what we did was cleared the overbrush back to the trunk of the tree. And what that did was basically clear out the area that was overhanging the backslope interceptor swales. So you couldn't even see this or this in the top two pictures.
Right.
You couldn't even see it because the trees were overhanging over it. So we were able to push that back. Then we reestablished those backslope interceptor swales. And then on the backside, which you can't really see in these 4 pictures, but on the bottom left, you see this other pipe that goes back into the woods. And at the top of bank, we actually built in a new E-inlet that is, E-inlet's what's in the top left picture, that box looking thing with a hole in it. That's an E-inlet. And so we built a new one of those back behind that that bottom picture. So we got a new E-inlet that'll allow the water that comes in from off the street and that falls onto the top of the ditch to flow in those backslope interceptor swales and go into these E-inlets and then go into the big ditch. So, and lastly, if you just look at the overall ditch itself, we've cleaned out all of the silt. We've overcut it by about 6 inches or so, widened it a little bit, put that that material back up on the slopes, and then there'll be hydromulch seeding this Friday is the goal. And so this will get this ditch back up and running to tip-top shape.
Great. That top right photo, Eric, you can kind of see the inlet thing.
Yeah, right there, there's in the top, little light colored, that's that inlet right there.
Yeah.
That's that inlet. It just basically looks like one of these. It's just a new one.
Yeah.
It looks like that box thing in the top left. That's an inlet. So we built another one of those on top of it to allow drainage to come in.
Very good.
So, yeah, we had a little issue with a couple of the neighbors. We had a neighbor jump in the ditch and protest and tell us to stop. While his neighbor was saying go. So we had some interesting interactions with some folks, but we got it done. I think it looks really good, really does. And once we get the vegetative growth, I'll feel more comfortable, obviously, when the vegetative growth comes back in, because that's really what holds the slopes together, you know. So the hydromulch seeding with a little bit of light rain, hopefully next week, and some heat, we'll fire that up. We'll get the grass going.
So the person who was protesting, what was the issue? Didn't like the vegetation disappearing or what?
Well, the individual that wanted this project didn't like the vegetation getting pushed back, and then had comments about just ins and outs of the project. The one that was in the ditch in Waders saying, no, don't really know what,
Maybe efficient.
where he was at that point, but
I have been summoned out there 3
I know
times.
you have. Jim
Not the resident.
has been our interceptor and facilitator, moderator, if you will, out in the
The
field.
last visit, things were good.
Yeah, so I think I mean, you know, there's a lot, I mean, honestly, there was a lot of work, a lot of area was disturbed, and it's right behind houses, I get it. That some folks didn't understand. I think one of the things that I learned, that I think we're gonna adjust in our, I guess our, not policy, but in our operations, is we're gonna do a little bit better job. I mean, we clearly went out in the field and met with a couple residents, but when we started actually doing all the work, I think next time what we'll probably do is send out specific notifications to all of the folks that immediately back up to that area, just so they know that it's going on. We thought we had done it with the vocal people, you know, the people that, you know, were really, you know, vocal about it. But I don't know that we did it with all the rest of the folks that maybe weren't aware.
Just you said email or door?
I don't know. The door could be a number of different things. Yeah. Just bottom line is just communicating with them
That's a
better.
good idea.
Yeah.
I think that, I don't know if that would have solved what this issue was, but
Yeah, that and knowing the extent of the work, just
That's
like,
right.
yeah.
that's right. Yep. The other set of pictures is in Windsor Hills. You had, Anna's been to the meeting a couple times just to ask about that. We're actually in the middle of that project right now. We got a couple more days to go, but they've started clearing out the center line of the ditch. There's some hog damage that's not shown in these pictures that we're addressing, and then a sinkhole, a minor sinkhole area that's we'll also be addressing. So we're hopeful that we can have that wrapped up by the end of the week as well. So both of these should be done by the end of the week.
Great.
Next item I had was just to remind y'all that we kind of mentioned it earlier, but the All Mud meeting on June 10th, focus with that will be to hear from HDR on the AC waterline condition-based assessment that's been going on for almost a year now. So we'll hear about that. Want to turn your attention to the trustee summary in the back of the report on page, she's what is it? There we go. Yeah, on bottom of page 79, just the GRP summary of, this is the GRP summary of last month. And this, the way the dates fell, the next GRP meeting was actually 2 days ago. So this is a summary of last month's meeting because there hadn't been a meeting since, but their meeting happened earlier. So just to update, and I'll put that in next month's report as well for 2 days ago's meeting. But that we on Monday we heard the draft budget, and then there was further conversation from Lone Star trying to discredit one of the committeemen, and then there was talk at the end about the committee looking for ways to possibly increase utilization of the plant. And I think that was maybe the first time that all 6 members were perhaps on the same page. So I don't know if that was a breakthrough or not, but I'm going to take it as positive and see where it goes from there. We'll see. So.
Just a couple of questions. I was reviewing the budget, preliminary budget, and I noticed we're projecting to increase production, but no rate increase. And that just kind of is puzzling to me. And I also noticed that you're budgeting for Conroe to pay, if I read it correctly, their arrears and pay current and then be part of the program going forward. Is that in the projected budget as well?
So Conroe,
Increase.
yeah, we always budget that everybody's going to be paying their bills. We have not factored in, but I take that back. There was 1 year we actually factored in that they were not going to pay it, and that caused a rate increase. So the budget automatically assumes everybody's paying. We're not factoring in the potential payment of the past due amounts at this time. That'll come in, and when it comes in, we'll do it a budget amendment like we do here and spend it out from there. Production is going up from 13.2 to 15, including some flow to Conroe if they pay their bills. And the way it's done is demands went from 58.62 MGD to 62.96. So we went up 4.5 MGD per day, which equated to about a $4 million increase in revenue per year.
Compared to how much additional expense?
1.2 million, I think, for that.
Same delta?
Well, for the
Increase
in production. But the bigger thing was the city of Houston fee. And so by January 25, basically by January 1st, we had to start utilizing city of Houston water in lieu of Lake Conroe or San Jacinto water.
Mm-hmm.
So the delta between Lake Conroe water or San Jacinto River Authority water and city of Houston water was about $4 million increase.
Yeah. It's just, I haven't dug a deep dive in or done a deep dive, but it just intuitively, it seemed to have those rising expenses and more expenses in the production and to be able to do this with no fee increase, put up a little red flag in my mind. I hope it works out.
You got it. Yeah.
Didn't you also increase the volume of water pumped?
GRP.
Well water, yeah, so
Right, and that's-
talking more revenue.
Right, and so that's the biggest thing, as long as groundwater does not drop overall, if it increases, and that's.
So that's a big plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is,
Okay, now
because
I
there's
have
no
a
expense. to
They
that.
both
Yeah.
went up. I asked the
It's still
question in the meeting and that was the answer. They both went up.
Okay,
So I've got 1.2 basically, or 1.8 is surface, the other is ground.
Is Magnolia also in arrears?
They are. Not nearly as much as Conner, I think they're 1.5,
Yeah, one,
with interest, 1.5 million.
Are they being handled separately in terms of resolution or are they?
we wanted to get Conroe taken care of first. They're both in a moratorium, but Conroe's a much bigger number to worry about than what Magnolia is.
If I could follow up a little bit on Eric's comments about the GRP meeting in April. It was an interesting, I listened to the meeting on tape and then I attended the last meeting a couple of days ago. And we have some new board members on the GRP and they tend to be qualified, outspoken people with ideas. Eric's one of them. This other gentleman's Ben Slotnick, who has a PhD in geology. He has a mud that they're having trouble with their wells. And he's saying, wait a minute, I'm having aquifer trouble, I believe. And he's smart enough, capable enough to pull some pictures together, show you what he's talking about. The Lone Star has their own technical experts. The argument was, you're a geologist with a PhD, but you're not a hydrogeologist licensed in the state of Texas, so you shouldn't be commenting. If there, in my experience, if you're challenging a man's credentials to talk, even though he makes sense, then you've got a problem with your argument. But I want to compliment Eric and the composition of that board because I think there, as he said, they were in communication and agreement about some issues. I think we saw, in my personal opinion, with Eric added, we're seeing a great improvement in that board that's going to be for the benefit of all the citizens and residents. So thank you again, Eric, for being on that board and he actually chaired the last meeting. So it was quite nice.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Last thing I really had was just to point out a few articles that we put in the back. That are, articles about things going on in the area. And then, one other thing I had was to kick it to John.
Afternoon. Page 73 begins your communications report. We're in the last month, the second quarter of our strategic plan. With that focus has been on water quality. Last few months, we're going to shift to water conservation in June through August, summer. So you'll see that reflected in our materials. The community working group for the infrastructure renewal campaign, they had their fourth meeting at wastewater treatment facility number 1 on May 13th. Got a great tour by the staff there. They were very impressed by the staff. It was really enriching experience, and also heard from Eric just a brief overview of the 4 alternatives for renewing the facility. They're due to meet on July 1. The next time they meet is July 1, and they'll hear from Corolla then. So they get a little deeper with the
I
information.
thought it was a good meeting. I attended, but I guess I was a little disappointed by the attendance because I don't know what the exact number was, but let's call it 15 people or so were there, maybe
Maybe it was 18, I believe, but yeah.
close enough. And about half of those approximately were all mud directors who have toured the facility once before, perhaps. So I was kind of expecting a much bigger turnout of the non-mud director members of the CWG, and they, that was disappointing to me that they missed that opportunity. So kudos to the SJRA putting on it and the guys who led the tour. The usual stellar job, but it was a missed opportunity for all those folks.
Yeah, and Cindy and Eric, who lead those sessions, impress upon the group each time, and in communications outside of the meetings, that their presence is important.
Yeah.
And that's why we have alternatives if they can't make it. Because relaying that information is what it's all about.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted everybody to be kind of aware of.
We've got a couple videos in process being produced. We've got a long series mapped out. But this summer, we're going to try to get 2 done. These are 2 to 3 minute videos. First one being just a broad overview of who Woodlands Water is, what we do, bring some faces to the agency. We can use that in a whole variety of ways, presentations, online, and so forth. And then the second video will be how our water supply works, all from source to tap. So we'll have some interviews intermixed with some animation, so folks can better understand how they get their water. We have also, in our continuing attempt to get more video and be more visual in our communications, more digestible, we have hired a part-time social media specialist. Her name is Stephanie Williams. She just began on Monday, and now she's going to be really doing a lot with social media in particular, and short videos or reels. Again, just to not only reach more people, but when we get there, have that information, again, be better, more easily digested and more appealing. So that's exciting for me. And I think you'll see some improvements in our communications from that. We got some examples of current market materials here, next couple pages, and then just finally on page, put that in your print. Oh, the outreach calendar is missing from here, but there's an outreach calendar that normally is part of your packet. And just want to note that I will be out at Farmers Market. I was supposed to be out there this Saturday. I'll be out there next.
Into the GM report.
Is it in there somewhere?
Page 70, I found. Yeah, it's curious what's coming up.
Got printed weird. Okay. I will not be at the Farmers Market this Saturday. That's the short of it. I will be out there in June. We're trying to get out there monthly, and as well as other in-person events. So come on out and see us. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
13,
I'd like to take this opportunity at the general manager's report to present a shout out to Kim and her crew. They lent an extraordinary hand, went way beyond the call of duty to board of directors at Windsor Hills and their president. They had a substantial backup effluent, and they went out and but were able to help them. It turns out it was all on Windsor Hills property, but they went the extra mile and checked all the public or our potential property, found 2 manholes that were buried, found a clean out that that Windsor Hills didn't know about. And the president called me the other day and thanked me, and I passed it on. He said he would write a letter. I said, please do. I'm sure they appreciate it.
I'll tell you what, Randy and Dan, he did the hard work. They were out there, in the heat, helping them find it.
He mentioned Randy's by name.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So thank you very much.
okay, 13. Consider an act on authorizing WWA to evaluate the mud wastewater allocation for
Yes.
W1.
The trustees had a meeting on the 22nd of April. And in that meeting, they requested and then confirmed last week at the trustee meeting that this ought to be on all the agendas for all the MUDs. To take back the idea to the MUDs to have WWA go in and kind of do a verification of the SFDUEs that were developed in the 6th and final accounting. So that's what this item is about. I'll go into a bunch of detail about how we're going to do it, but essentially we've the technology that was utilized to build the 6th and final is obsolete and not usable for us anymore. So about 6 months ago, I orchestrated with our GIS consultant to rebuild the 6th and final in Esri GIS. So that was completed about a month ago, early April. And that will be the tool that we'll be able to utilize to go in and look at all the parcels throughout the woodlands, both developed and undeveloped. Look at compare where it is today versus what was contemplated in the 6th and final. And so the questions from the trustees came up about, well, is 7 MGD the number or not? Is it the right number? And so that's kind of where the questions came from. So this would be to authorize us to proceed with that.
Quick question. I noticed in the agenda item, it's just wastewater, single-family dwelling unit equivalents. Will you also be looking at land use and maybe the water values as well?
So the big picture is, and it also just says for the service area wastewater treatment plant, number one. So I
Okay.
want to be clear that
Okay.
this is to figure out the numbers for the wastewater treatment plant service area number
Got
one.
it.
That being said, candidly, we're doing the whole Woodlands.
Because.
So, because the sixth and final didn't differentiate service areas of anything,
Right.
Yeah.
right? It just said mud, 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 all the mud. So we're gonna be doing it for all the muds, but then we're gonna have to carve out the service area for one. That's really the question at hand for this item, but we're doing the whole thing. That may take a little longer, but
Just the FYI, when it was initially set up years ago after the final, it was agreed that it would be looked at on a yearly basis just to do a check, to go out and do a field check to see, especially in the commercial arenas, if it was still valid and if it needed to be tweaked. So that was done several years and then it became obsolete and we got a new consultant and it may have been dropped, but the intent was to review that data on an annual basis, especially in the commercial areas.
so it was for a few years. And when the new information came in, the system was just updated from that spot. And then the next year was updated and then, but there was no accounting of what changed throughout those years.
Lost the history.
Right, so so that it was done annually. What this will allow us to do with this new tool is we're gonna look at it annually, but we're gonna create a new layer every year.
Right.
So we'll now be able to see the difference of what happened every
Very
year.
good.
And we'll probably do it every year just as a check.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we have to report to SRA to say, hey, next year, this is what we see coming. This is the demands that we need you to provide. You know, and the reason that I started this 6 months ago was my concern was whenever that time comes, years down the road, when we're getting down to the nitty gritty, I don't want to find out that we're short or vice versa. And then kind of be up against it with, it may not be in 67, but it may be in something about where we're down to the end and we haven't seen it coming. I want to plan ahead, basically.
Motion to approve.
Yeah.
Continue discussion, just as a question. So we're an undeveloped mud. Will this database be the database that we use to determine our developed status?
It may be information that LJ utilizes to make that determination. They're the ones that make that determination.
Okay.
Happy to share the information with them. But keep in mind that the statute doesn't call for the connections that are completed. It calls for the infrastructure necessary to serve your boundary.
Okay.
That's different than
Understood.
counting connections. I just want to clarify that.
Sure.
Now, it may be somewhat related perhaps, but it's a little different.
Okay,
So
cool.
what's the-
I'm sorry, Jim.
About 2 months or so. Those-
How's that going to impact the Corolla study? And
At this point, it's on hold until this is
you said that earlier, okay.
Yeah. And then once that number is,
And the 2 months is just for wastewater treatment plant number one. The demand for that plant.
right, for us to go through the tool to validate.
It's not the entire Woodlands that you were talking about.
Well, interesting thing is, you know, the Woodlands is about 34,000 connections. 32,000 of them are single family. So that's an easier validate because that's the basis. What the Delta is really all the commercial and all the multifamily and whatnot. So we're gonna have to, and there's just over 2,000 of those connections. So it's not as big as you would think, but we still need to go through every single one of them. You know, and then we'll need to look at the undeveloped and probably compare the current undeveloped to what was contemplated in the sixth and final. And then we may have to talk to Howard Hughes and say, hey, is this still good for what they're thinking on the undeveloped? You know, I don't know what they, had allotted for each of those undeveloped properties. And then ultimately, I mean, if we're being smart about it, you can't not look at the potential redevelopment aspect of this, because there's going to be redevelopment across the Woodlands. And what will that mean? Does that mean that a redevelopment of a property is going to be more capacity? Not necessarily. If it goes from single to multi-story, maybe there is a a greater demand component to it, but we'll need to incorporate some of that into this, figure it best we can. I mean, you're not going to be able to ultimately crystal ball to the end of the Woodlands, you know, at this point. It's going to continue to evolve as the years go on.
I second Jim's.
Thank you, sir.
So did Jim make a motion?
I did.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, trustees report, Paul?
Nothing to add, what's been said and what's in the report.
Okay. Do we need,
Do not.
okay, any matters for placement on future agenda? Hearing none, then meeting is adjourned.